stuck here. The cops won't bother me. Hey guys, I just got this bike. It's a Ninja 250R from 2010. It's kind of interesting because this particular bike, I used to have an 08 Ninja 250, and I had an 09 Ninja 250, and I had an 02 Ninja 250. I really like these bikes. This was given to me free from Nathan, so thank you, Nathan. This bike does not work. It's been sitting for about 5 years, so we are going to see if we can get this bike to start. It cranks, the battery is completely dead, but this is a very reliable bike, and if you're interested in getting a cheap sport bike, this is one of the better bikes. You know, not a lot of people talk about these bikes anymore because there's greater and better bikes out there. And of course, this one is a little bit old because it is carbureted. If it was fuel injection, it probably would start right away. So I've already removed the seat and I removed the battery cover, and it's fairly easy to do. Doesn't look like a 250 from afar. And when you go and you ride my FJR 1300, you'll feel right away the very low weight of this bike. I had quite a bit of good time riding this. I even rode this particular bike to Canada and all the way to Georgia. And I was considering doing a cross-country trip before I bought my my V-Strom 650. The gas tank on this, or the gas inside the gas tank, is pretty old, but it does have fuel in there. It is in really good shape. There's nothing wrong with the gas tank. And I thought maybe there was a dent or something, but up here is very simple. There's nothing particular fancy about this, but it's very easy to use. And I think that's what I like about this Ninja 250 is the simplicity. And look at this, you have a choke. So that's something I'm not used to seeing in motorcycles for quite some time. Nathan left the gas tank all full because if it was empty and you didn't ride it for 4 years or so, you might create rust inside. And I've seen bikes that have been left stored for a very long time, and it simply just builds up a lot of rust, and it could rust out the entire tank. So in a way, I'm very glad that he didn't do that. Notice that this hose here was aimed at the battery like this because there was fuel coming out. So one thing that's happening is that when you crank it, turn on the choke, and you can see it wants to start. On this hose, when I crank it, there we go. Let me turn off the choke. And you can see the bike does start. Alright, the first thing we're going to do is remove the bolts for the fairings because we have to release the gas tank. There's also washers along with the bolts that you're removing, and make sure you don't scratch the tank. Alright, so that, and then just take this back part. One of the things I have here is a gas can because we're going to be using this to get any of the gas in the tank because it might be too old and I just want to start fresh with new gas. And because there's an epidemic happening, gas is at all-time low right now, so I don't really care too much about losing this. What we have here is the petcock, and actually in my 08 Ninja this went bad at one point and it started leaking gas, so this is kind of like a weak spot. But you could set it to prime and it'll start dripping gas out here, and this could take a while to drain, but this is the vent, so this is vented wrong, this little gas hose. What I'm going to do is just going to turn it off, and actually off is on, and you can see once you remove that, when you put it on the on position, it actually stops the flow of gas. Move the battery so we don't get electronic power. That's the negative, and this one is the positive. The battery should come right out. Our removal of the airbox, it's also important to remove this battery box. There are 2 Phillip head screws down here. Just undo them, and then we should be able to pull this out. Now, I haven't done any Ninja sort of 250 maintenance. There's also a fuse that's on here. You just push it up, and now the box should come out. There we go. These Japanese bikes is that a lot of them just use 10 millimeters, and you can get these 10 millimeters here. These hold the tank to the frame, and we're gonna loosen this up. Remove the bolts. Remove this bracket. At this point, the tank should be loose. There we go. Before you start removing the tank, what you want to do is pull up on this plastic, and there's fairing bolts that are attached to the fairing and to the tank. But if you pull them out without lifting up on the fairing, you're going to be breaking the fairing. At this point, you really can't remove the gas tank, but you can slide it a little bit down from the fairing. That way it's going to let you remove the hoses that are holding the tank down here. There's a couple. There's a sensor for the fuel tank. There's a couple hoses for the gas going into the carbs. So at this point you can see that the plastic is being lifted up, and I can move the tank a little bit more freer, but it is getting stuck a little bit, and it is binding a little bit. There's these rubber cushions here that you have to lift up and back. I want to take a piece of 2x4. So this sensor needs to be removed. That's the fuel gauge sensor, and it's just a clip. You push down on the green and it comes out. At this point you have the ability of removing these 2 hoses here. There's one here and one here. If you use some pliers or something, just slide this back, and this rubber is going to be really hard because it probably hasn't been removed in a very long time. So just kind of twist it back and forth until it's out. And then you could leave the hose here, but what I like to do is just slide it out and coming out, and that's it. So now we should be able to lift up the tank. All right, now by having your hands here and here, we should be able to completely remove it. There is this hose on this left side. Let me show you. I guess you can say it's the exhaust of the bike that's very improperly routed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unclip it. I think that's probably the best thing. So if it's stuck, just take your pliers and twist it until it comes out. Tank. You should set the tank on something like this because there is a petcock right over there, and you don't want to set it on the floor because it could be dripping. So position it in a bucket like this. Remember, we're going to be draining the gas tank anyway. So at this point we have the gas tank off, and right in here, this is the carburetors, but we need to remove the airbox. Now, I haven't done this in quite some time because I haven't had my Ninja 250, but it's I think we are going to be removing the airbox. You gotta love the simplicity of Japanese bikes, keeping just about everything the same size. Before we go any further, there's another bolt here, and you use a hex, which is a 5mm, and just remove this. That's going to unclip it from the airbox. We need to remove this fuse. This is the main fuse for the bike. It's a 30 amp fuse, and then that's it. I think we can put this aside. We're going to uncouple this. We're going to remove this hose for the airbox, which is right here, and you might have to squeeze this with some form of pliers. This one seems to be okay, and there we go. The airbox is fairly easy to remove. These 3 bolts, which are 5 millimeters. This is the air filter, and you just pull it out. I don't know if you can tell, there's like some flaking. I'm going to remove the airbox and then clean up all of this. To remove the airbox, you're going to have to use a very long hex, and I think this is a T15 or whatever it is, and it's a clamp that goes around the airbox and the carburetor. So we're going to remove that first. A lot of times I can't find the right tools, so whatever. And once it becomes loose, you don't have to remove the bolt, but now it's loose and we should be able to slide the airbox back. One of the things I like to do is position those bolts up, that way I can reach them from the top. Before you remove the airbox, you need to remove this bolt, and it's really well hidden just above the sprocket cover. And also, while you're here, there is a vent that goes into the airbox. So using a 5 millimeter socket, you're going to reach in here, and it's a very well hidden bolt here that holds the airbox to the frame. You're going to have to remove that first, and also on the other side, slightly to the left, is a vent that vents into, I guess, the carburetor or the crankcase of the bike from the airbox. You're also going to have to unplug that. And an extension, slide that in and undo this bolt that's really hidden. There we go. For me to remove the carburetor easier, I'm just going to go ahead and remove the plastics. The plastics are on with just these bolts. So this one, front. There's also washers with it. Keep them all together. So there's some bolts right here that you have to push in on a tab to release. There is also a bolt here that divides the 2 bits of plastic. Pull it out. One of the reasons I don't like sport bikes is all the plastic you have to undo to get in there. Here's another bolt. There's bolts here, and you have to kind of push in a tab. If you use like a pen or something, you could reach it really easy. There we go. See, I pulled the interior part of the plastic in. Let's look at, even if I don't have to do this for the carburetors, it's still a good practice to do. And here we go. That's the plastic. Is removing this tab here. Well, let's go ahead and disconnect this and push it down and push it up. Should be coming out. Another one of those tabs that I forgot to remove is at the bottom here. That's that mushroom tab that was underneath. You have to remind yourself that the parts where you don't see in the plastic, there's these tabs that hold it down. One of the reasons I hate sport bikes, so much tabs, so much plastic to undo, so much work just to get to the parts where you need to do. This blinker, tough to push down, and that's it, that's the plastic. I have to remove all of this to reach the carburetor. But because the carburetor has never been removed on this bike, the bolts on it are kind of like weirdly positioned. So I need, the better way to get to the carb is to remove the plastic. But in a way I'm glad I did, because you see this? It's at its lowest. It's below the low level. So I'm going to fill this back up with coolant. And of course this has never been filled because it's so hard to see on these bikes. The reservoir, just position it differently. Using an 8 millimeter, you can slide this out and just make sure you put this all together. Put this in here. There we go. Might as well remove it just a little bit more. Now that we've removed the plastic, you can see it's so much easier to reach these 2 screws. You can remove this one directly to the carburetor, and this is the the boot. Make sure when you're looking at this that the carburetor boot, the plastic bit, is not ripped or anything. What happens as motorcycles age is that the rubbers of the bikes tend to crack and start to get holes, and this would create a vacuum leak. So it's a little important to visually inspect stuff. So at this point you have to undo both sides. There's bolts on each intake of the carb, so undo both, loosen them up. You see it's pretty loose. Go to the other side. These have never been taken apart. The carburetor has never been removed. It's going to be very difficult to pull out. And using a screwdriver and just kind of pushing it, you can see it's already come off the boot. I think if I remove this, it'll be easier to remove the carburetor. There we go. This also holds the choke. Let's put the nuts back on here, just loose. This is why I don't like a lot of these sport bikes, because they have so much plastic. And now the carburetor is coming out. Make sure you don't pinch any of these electronics as you're pushing it out. I'm also going to be pulling this plastic off, and the reason I'm pulling it off is just so I can see if there's anything broken in this underside. And it should be fairly easy. There's a bunch of bolts, this one, this one, this one, and these two up here on the top, and this separates into two halves. We're still not able to pull it out from the engine. We also have some cables here. That's where the throttle is. There are different ways of pulling it out. You could disconnect the cable directly like this. There's one more cable up here, which is the choke cable, and if you push it outwards and then inwards, you can unclip it. Let's see if we can pull out the carburetor. There is one more cable attached, but this one should be easy to remove. Now the next thing we have is this tube here, and it's a tube that goes to the tank for venting, and all you do is pull it out. It shouldn't be on too hard. There we go. It's coming up. So remember that T-clip goes over here in the carburetor. And now let's see if we can pull the carb out. There we go. It's coming nice and easy. And here we go. That is the carb. Carb or the motor be exposed to anything entering. I'm going to put these two latex gloves just right over it, or maybe even one will do, just so I can protect it in case anything goes in. Kind of stuck here. The cops won't bother me.